Jabatan Tenaga Kerja Semenanjung Malaysia JTKSM mengesan terdapat segelintir syarikat kawalan keselamatan di seluruh negara gagal mematuhi perintah gaji minimum RM1,700 yang berkuasa 1 Februari lalu. Ketua pengarahnya Kamal Pardi berkata kesalahan itu boleh menyebabkan majikan terbabit didenda di bawah Akta Majlis Perundingan Gaji Negara 2011 Akta 732.
Hi, my name is Natasha Adira binti Anwar.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Putra Muhammad Nazmi bin Rosli.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Nabila binti Muhammad Yusof Tan.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Nurul Abrar binti Mama Khalil.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Nik Nurul Izzah binti Zulkifli.
So now I'm going to talk the introduction about the minimum wage policy. So Prime Minister Najib Razak has introduced minimum wage policy on his first budget proposal on 15 October 2010. And this policy is aimed to improve the social well-being and labour market, and also aim to make Malaysia as a high-income country by the year of 2020. And it's become the one of important instrument in new economic model NPE. And this policy has officially took effect on 1 January 2013. Now, under the permission of Anwar Ibrahim, the latest revision of Minimum Wage Order 2024 has officially took effect on 1 February 2024. And there are many perspectives about minimum wage policy in terms of positive perspective and negative perspective. In terms of positive perspective, minimum wage policy will help to improve the living standard and social welfare of workers. But in terms of negative perspective, it will cause the labour demand to decrease and inflation to rise.
Next, I will explain about the actors involved in making and implementation of public policy. We want to look who are the actors are involved in making the minimum wage policy. There are four actors I want to explain. The first is political executive, the legislature, next the government agency, and the last one we want to look the interest group. So, for the first actors is political executive. So, what is the political executive? Political executive are those who are politically appointed to their executive position, usually by means of elections. They are usually the head of government, whose function to formulate the policy and ensure it passes through the legislature. For example, during the national budget, Datuk Seri Najib as a Prime Minister had announced for the first time of the introduction of minimum wage policy. So we can see that the political executive, a Prime Minister, is able to set the agendas of policy making as well as the table of policy that will be considered by the legislature. Next, the second actors who are involved in making and implementation of minimum wage policy is the legislature. Legislature is the branch of government that consists of group of people who have power to enact, to change the law in the state or country. The legislature plays a crucial role in the public policy making by being the primary bodies responsible for drafting, debating, and enacting the policy that address the public issue. On the legislative stage of the minimum wage policy making process, the Parliament take a role to scrutinize the bill and vote to legislate the bill. Other than that, Member of Parliament MP also play a role in ensuring that the strategy of implementation benefits their constituent. The third actors we want to look is government agency. Government agencies are considered the larger parts of the executive branch in the Malaysian government structure. Government agencies always help the government to set the agendas, formulate, implement, and even evaluate the policy. Government agency consists of civil servants, professional workers, and the experts. In Malaysia, there are two main government agencies under the minimum wage policy, which is National Wage Consultative Council, who are involved in the decision and the execution of the minimum wage policy. And the second, the Department of Labour in Peninsula Sabah and Sarawak, who are enforced the Malaysian labor law and international labor agreement. Lastly, the actors who are involved in implementation of public policy is interest group. Interest groups in the civil society are generally known as those who are not in the government and its bureaucracy but have influence on how policy are made. Interest groups always have intention of affecting how policy are made and attempt to influence the policy making process. We identify there are three interest groups influence in making of minimum wage policy. The first one is Malaysian Employers Federation (MEF). MEF always give a criticism on the minimum wage policy. For example, they said the policy placed a lot of pressure into the business. The second one is the Congress of Union of Employer in Public and Civil Service Malaysia (QPES). QPES as a vocal voice for the public servant in formulating their wages. For the last one is Khazanah Research Institute (KRI). KRI as a think tank, of course, contribute a lot of criticism on any public policy process, including this policy.
Hi everyone, so next I will explain the key policy problems that led to the implementation of the minimum wage policy in Malaysia. So one of the most significant issues is the rising cost of living. Over time, the prices of basic necessities such as food, housing, and also transportation have continued to increase. However, which did not increase at the same rate, especially for low and semi-skilled workers. So this created a clear imbalance between income and daily expense. Many workers were earning the same amount but had to spend more just to maintain their basic standard of living. Even before the minimum wage policy was introduced in 2013, this issue was already affecting many households in Malaysia. For example, the increase in the consumer price index shows that the overall price of goods and services was rising, which directly reflects higher living costs. Because of this, workers experienced reduced purchasing power. This not only affected their daily life, but also a wider impact on the economy, as lower spending can slow down the economic growth. The second issue is low wage and income inequality. Before the implementation of the minimum wage policy, there was no standardized wage system in Malaysia. This allowed employers to set wage freely, often at the very low levels. As a result, many workers, even those working full-time, were still unable to cover their basic needs. So this situation contributed directly to the income inequality, where certain groups of workers earn significantly less compared to the others. A strong example of this issue can be seen among the security guards. Before the policy, some of them were earning around RM600 per month despite working long hours, sometimes up to 12 hours a day. This amount is clearly not enough to support a decent standard of living. It also highlights how many workers were often forced to rely on overtime just to survive, which raises concerns about exploitation and also poor working conditions. Because of this, the minimum wage policy became important as it aimed to protect low-income workers, reduce inequality, and also ensure a more fair distribution of income across the society. The third issue is the lack of the proper wage regulation. Before 2012, Malaysia did not have a fixed minimum wage, which meant that employers had full control over how much to pay their workers. Without a clear standard, wage varied widely across the industries. So, many workers, especially those in low-skilled jobs, had a very little bargaining power and were forced to accept whatever wage were offered to them. For example, in sectors such as cleaning services or small businesses, some workers were paid very low wage and were required to work long hours without proper overtime compensation. Because there was no legal wage floor, these unfair practices were difficult to control. So this created an imbalanced labor system where the workers were easily exposed to being underpaid and also overworked. Moreover, low and inconsistent wage can also affect worker motivation. When workers feel that their effort is not fairly rewarded, they are less likely to be motivated, which can reduce productivity and also overall job performance. So this not only affects the workers themselves, but can also impact the organizations and the economy. So overall, the absence of the proper wage regulation left many workers unprotected and vulnerable. So, these three issues, rising cost of living, low wage and income inequality, and lack of wage regulation, demonstrates why the minimum wage policy was necessary in Malaysia. It was introduced not only to increase wage, but also to address deeper structural problems and improve the overall well-being of workers. So next, I will pass to the next presenters. Thank you.
Now, let's look at the objective of this policy. Minimum wage policy is one of the most important components in labour market regulation, as it focuses on establishing a minimum wage and salary for workers. The primary concern of this policy is not merely economic performance, but also clear and structured objectives that aim to benefit workers, employers, and society. These objectives are designed to ensure justice, protection, and sustainability within the labour market, researched by ZO 2025. First, the main objective of minimum wage policy is to improve the standard of living of workers. This means ensuring that employees are paid at a level that allows them to live with dignity and basic comfort. A fair minimum wage helps reduce financial hardship and supports a reasonable quality of life, especially for low-income groups in Journal Rights by ZO 2025. Closely related to this, the policy also ensures that workers can afford essential necessities such as food, housing, education, and healthcare, stated by Scores 2025. These needs form the foundation of human well-being and important for maintaining a productive workforce. Adequate incomes allows workers to access nutritious food, secure stable housing, and obtain education for themselves and their families. Research by Masalu 2025, it also enables them to manage healthcare expenses without falling into financial distress, which helps reduce poverty risk. Second, the policy aims to strengthen worker welfare and security. By setting a minimum wage, workers are protected from exploitation and extremely low pay. This creates a fairer working environment. In addition, fair wages can increase job satisfaction and reduce turnover among workers. Workers who feel secure in their jobs are more likely to be committed and productive. Third, minimum wage policy also provides social protection. Although social protection is often linked to government assistance, this policy complements it by ensuring workers earn enough to support themselves. Adequate wages act as a financial cushion during unexpected situations such as illness or emergency. This reduces dependence on external aid and help workers maintain financial stability. Fourth, the policy promotes productivity and efficiency within the workforce. When workers are paid fairly, they tend to be more motivated and committed to their work. This leads to better performance and higher productivity. At the same time, employers may invest in training, improve management, and better technology to adapt to higher wage structure. In addition, minimum wage policy also encourages industrial modernization. Business may improve efficiency by adopting new technologies and optimizing production process in response to higher labor costs. As a result, industry become more innovation and competitive, stated by World Bank 2024. Fifth, the policy aims to increase reliance on a skilled local workforce. By offering fair wages, employment becomes more attractive to local workers, encouraging their participation in the labor market. This also motivates workers to develop their skills, which is important for long-term economic development. Furthermore, minimum wage policy also helps reduce dependence on low-skilled foreign workers. Since wages are standardized, firms are encouraged to reassess hiring strategies and invest more in local talent stated by OECD 2025. This creates a more balanced and sustainable workforce structure. That's all from me. I will pass it to the next presenter. Thank you.
Next, I will explain about the strategy implementation of the policy. There are two effective dates for minimum wage policy order 2024 to implement the minimum wage of 1,700 ringgit per month, which is started on the 1st February 2025. For this level, the enforcement are for employers who are employed 5 employees or more employees. It is also for employees regardless of number of employees employed whose carry out the professional activity classified under Malaysian Standard Classification of Occupation (MESCO). For the next effective date is on 1st August 2025. For this level of enforcement are for employers who are employed with fewer than 5 employees.
Now, I would like to explain the evaluation of the minimum wage order Malaysia by discussing its strengths and weaknesses. This policy was introduced to improve workers' welfare by setting a legal minimum wage. However, like any public policy, it brings both positive and negative impacts. One major strength of this policy is that it protects low-income workers. Under the Minimum Wage Order 2022, the minimum monthly wage was increased to 1,500 ringgit. This means employers are not allowed to pay workers below this amount. As a result, many workers are better able to afford essential needs such as food, transportation, rent, and healthcare. It helps reduce financial pressure, especially for workers in low-skilled sectors. Besides that, higher wages can improve purchasing power. For example, a study conducted in Sabah showed that household consumer spending increased after the implementation of the minimum wage policy. This suggests that workers had more ability to spend on daily necessities and improve their living standards. The second strength is that the policy helps reduce income inequality. By increasing wage for the lowest paid workers, the income gap between lower income and higher income group can be narrowed. This policy is especially beneficial for the B40 group, which refer to the bottom 40% of household in terms of income. When their wage increase, they are better able to manage expenses, reduce financial pressure, and enjoy a better quality of life. According to a study by the Ministry of Economy and the Department of Statistics Malaysia in 2022, most sectors show improvement in wage inequality after the minimum wage adjustment, except the mining and quarrying sector due to its already high wage level. This shows that the policy contributes to a fairer income distribution. Another important strength is that better wages can improve worker motivation and productivity. When employees feel that they are paid fairly, they are usually more satisfied and commit to their job. Ibrahim and Abidin in a 2024 study found that fair wages are closely linked to employee commitment and motivation. Workers who feel fairly compensated are more likely to stay longer, reduce absenteeism, and perform better. In addition, workers who feel appreciated are more likely to cooperate with colleagues and contribute positively in the workplace. From the employer's perspective, a stable and motivated workforce can increase efficiency and long-term productivity. Next, we move to the weaknesses of the policy. Despite its benefits, one weakness of the policy is the risk of unemployment. When the government raises minimum wage, employers face higher labor costs. Some businesses, especially small companies, may not be able to afford the increased wage expenses. As a result, They may reduce hiring, shorten working hours, or retrench workers. According to Adama and Yunus in 2025, increases in minimum wage may reduce labor demand because employers face higher operating costs, especially in labor-intensive sector. Low-skilled and entry-level workers are usually the most affected because employers may view them as less productive compared to the higher wage costs. Another weakness is the possible growth of informal employment. To avoid paying the legal minimum wage, some employers may hire workers without proper contract or register them outside the formal system. These workers may receive lower pay and have no protection such as EPF, SOCSO, or legal benefit. Adha and Ashhadi in a 2025 study explained that when wage regulation become more costly, some employers may move outside the formal system to reduce labor expenses. This creates challenge because the government may find it harder to regulate labor standards and collect taxes. The final weakness is weak policy enforcement. Although the law exists, not all employers fully comply with the minimum wage requirement. Some workers may still be underpaid or denied fair salary adjustment. This often happens due to limited inspection, lack of manpower among enforcement agencies, and weak monitoring system. Hassan in a 2021 study found that enforcement of the minimum wage policy in Malaysia faced challenges such as limited manpower, inconsistent inspection, and administrative difficulties. Therefore, if enforcement remains weak, the policy may not fully achieve its objective of protecting workers. Overall, the success of this policy depends not only on the wage rate itself, but also on effective implementation and strong enforcement.
Now, we move to the several recommendations to overcome the weakness of this policy. The first one is the implementation of this policy is become the one of the important strategy to allow the sufficient time for the employers to restructure their business strategy and cost structure. Next, by improve the skill and competency of the workers, for example, like through the program training, especially for the fresh graduate and low-skilled workers to improve their productivity and reduce their unemployment. Other than that, by the provision of the government subsidy or tax relief to reduce the burden of the employers. For example, like during COVID-19, which subsidy has helped the employers to overcome their burden about the minimum wage policy. Other recommendation is by stronger the enforcement of labor law through the regular audit and investigate the complaint from the employee. The strict penalty should be imposed to the employers who fail to follow the minimum wage policy. Lastly, by educate through the education and awareness. Government agencies should actively conduct the campaign about the minimum wage policy to educate the employers and workers, and also to educate the employers about their legal responsibility to follow the minimum wage policy, and also to explain them about the benefit for the long term. In conclusion, Malaysia government has made every effort to safeguard the welfare of the people, and the implementation of Minimum Wage Order 2022 has given many benefits to the people, especially for the low-skilled workers. But there are many employers who are still refuse to comply with the minimum wage policy. Therefore, monitoring by the government will help to ensure the effectiveness of this policy. We can see that introducing a policy is not an easy task. There are many factors need to be considered. As a responsible citizen, we should always support the government effort. Thank you.
Kerajaan Madani sentiasa menitik beratkan soal pendapatan rakyat. Penstrukturan ekonomi hanya dianggap berjaya apabila rakyat meraih gaji dan upah yang bermakna untuk menjalani hidup yang lebih selesa. Untuk itu, kerajaan bersetuju menaikkan kadar gaji minimum dari RM1,500 kepada RM1,700 sebulan. Dan akan berkuat kuasa mulai 1 Februari 2025. Penangguhan hanya diberikan membabitkan majikan yang mempunyai kurang daripada 5 pekerja bagi tempoh 6 bulan iaitu berkuat kuasa 1 Ogos 2025. Kesuma juga akan menerbitkan garis panduan untuk rujukan pekerja. Jadi ini harus dibedakan. Gaji untuk juru teknik terlatih, lulusan TVET, mahasiswa, graduan universiti tidak boleh digunakan kadar 1,700. Mereka wajar diberi pertimbangan dan kita akan pantau syarikat-syarikat yang berjaya dan beruntungan besar yang tidak bersabah kalau mengekalkan gaji siswazah pada tahap yang rendah seperti mana sekarang. Dasar gaji progresif ini ikhtiar kerajaan untuk mereformasi pasaran buruh matlamat meningkatkan pendapatan pekerja. Dasar ini mula dilaksanakan secara rintis pada Jun lalu dan akan dikuasakan sepenuhnya pada tahun depan. Dasar gaji progresif diperuntukkan 200 juta ringgit dan akan memanfaatkan 50,000 pekerja. IPR, Inisiatif Pendapatan Rakyat, ini ikhtiar menoktahkan kemiskinan tegar melalui peningkatan pendapatan rakyat. Melalui IPR Insan, umpamanya, saudari Nur Maladiana yang merupakan OKU fizikal membantu suaminya berjaya meraih pendapatan keluarga hampir 2 kali ganda dan tahun depan 250 juta ringgit disediakan untuk meningkatkan penyertaan lebih ramai rakyat miskin tegar termasuk OKU mengikuti program IPR bagi menambah pendapatan mereka.